Trapped in a Beach Villa Part 1. Chapter 1. The Villa Mix-Up. The car slowed as the private drive curved upward through swaying palms, the tires crunching against the pale gravel like a soft drum roll announcing her arrival. Isabel leaned against the window of the tinted SUV, her forehead catching the coolness of the glass, as the first glimpse of the villa appeared through the canopy of tropical greenery. It wasn't just a house. It was a fantasy carved in white stone. Perched directly over the turquoise curve of the Caribbean, the villa stretched across the cliff like a piece of modern sculpture, all white marble, wide terraces, and floor-to-ceiling glass that reflected the endless sky. An infinity pool spilled seamlessly into the horizon, as if daring the ocean to compete. Bougainville climbed up the walls in riotous purple, and somewhere behind the villa, she could already hear the steady pulse of waves breaking against rock. Her chest tightened. This was supposed to be her sanctuary. A week of silence. A week of healing. A week to remember she was more than the disaster of a breakup she had barely crawled out of. The driver pulled to a stop in the circular driveway, where a fountain whispered over its edges. A pair of uniformed staff stepped forward, one reaching to open her door, the other already gathering her luggage from the trunk. "Señorita, welcome," the taller one said with a warm smile. "The villa is prepared for you." Prepared. The word made her exhale, as though she'd been holding her breath for months. Prepared for her. For once, something was hers alone. She smoothed her sundress, cream cotton, wrinkled from the flight, and stepped out into the heat. The air wrapped around her instantly, thick and warm, laced with salt and the faint sweetness of hibiscus. She inhaled deeply. Yes. This was what she needed. Inside, the villa's doors opened on silent hinges, and she stepped into marble-floored coolness. White walls. Pale stone. Vast glass windows framing the endless blue sea. Everything shimmered with the kind of money she couldn't even imagine, money that whispered in polished surfaces and the absence of anything unnecessary. Even the air conditioning was hushed. Her sandals clicked lightly as she crossed the foyer, her eyes catching on details, a sweeping staircase in white limestone, carved vases of orchids, a chandelier that glittered like a cascade of frozen raindrops. She smiled. For the first time in weeks, a smile that wasn't forced. And then, a sound. Low. Male. The quiet murmur of a voice. Not the staff. Deeper. More certain. Somewhere in the living room. Isabel froze. Her stomach clenched as she glanced toward the open space ahead, where light poured through the glass walls and spilled across a leather sectional sofa. The staff were behind her, busy with her bags, but she could hear him. A man. On the phone. His words clipped, sharp, in Spanish. His tone made her skin prickle. Isabel stepped forward, heart thudding. Her sandals tapped against the marble, announcing her presence whether she wanted to or not. And then she saw him. He was standing near the glass wall, back half turned to her, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a phone to his ear. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Dressed not for vacation but for business, dark slacks, a linen shirt unbuttoned at the throat. His hair was black, cut neatly, but just long enough that it curled slightly at the edges in the humidity. Even from here, she saw the hard set of his jaw, the way his posture radiated control. She stopped. Her pulse skipped. Because she knew him. Adrian Rivera. Her ex's brother. The older one. The colder one. The one nobody joked about at family gatherings. The one who never smiled in photographs. He turned then, mid-sentence, his gaze snapping to her like a spotlight. For a moment, he didn't speak. He just stared, his words cutting off into silence. His eyes, sharper than she remembered, dark amber flecked with gold, locked on her like a question he already had the answer to. The room shrank. "Isabel," he said finally, his voice smooth but carrying an edge that curled around her name. He lowered the phone, sliding it into his pocket with deliberate slowness. "What are you doing here?" Her throat went dry. She wanted to ask him the same thing. Instead, she forced her voice to work. I booked this villa. For the week." A pause. Then the faintest curve of a smile, not amused, not kind. "Dangerous." "So did I." She blinked. "That's impossible." "Apparently not." The staff returned then, cheerfully oblivious, setting her luggage down near the staircase. One of them bowed slightly. "Señor Rivera, everything is in order. Your suite is prepared." Her head whipped back to Adrian. "Your suite?" He didn't look away. "My villa." The words dropped heavy, final, like a door slamming shut. And in that moment, Isabel felt the truth crystallize in her chest. Her week of solitude, of healing, of escape. Gone. Because the man standing in front of her, her ex's older brother, richer, sharper, impossible to read, wasn't leaving. And neither was she. Chapter 2. 1 week. One deal. The silence stretched so long Isabel could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the distant rhythm of waves colliding with the rocks below. Her bags sat on the marble floor like intruders, announcing a stay that suddenly felt like trespassing. Adrian Rivera leaned one shoulder against the glass wall, arms crossed, studying her as if she were an unexpected entry in a ledger he was determined to reconcile. He wasn't angry. He wasn't surprised. Just assessing. That almost made it worse. "This is a mistake," Isabel said finally, her voice sharp from nerves. "The booking company. I own the villa." His words cut in, calm, factual. "There is no mistake." She blinked. Her throat tightened. "You own." "The company runs it for me. Family properties. We rotate them through. I rarely come here, but I needed silence. And now," his gaze flicked to her bags. "I have you." It wasn't flirtation. Not even close. It was an observation, delivered in that low, infuriatingly even tone that carried more weight than if he'd raised his voice. She swallowed, her chest tightening. The irony was cruel. She had left Los Angeles to escape her ex, Daniel, Adrian's younger brother, and now she'd walked directly into Adrian's world. The colder, sharper, richer version of the man who'd broken her heart. She forced her chin up. "Then I'll go. I'll find another villa." "Booked," he said. "Every property on this coast is full. A conference. A wedding. Take your pick. I'll book a hotel. They're full too." And even if they weren't, he gestured toward the terrace, where heavy clouds gathered low on the horizon, bruise-colored and ominous. "No ferries. No flights. They're suspending travel for at least 3 days. Possibly a week." Her stomach dropped. She turned toward the view, and sure enough, the sea was changing. The turquoise brilliance she'd admired just an hour ago was darkening, streaked with silver, the waves rising in restless humps. Far out, a crack of lightning split the horizon in two. She looked back at him, pulse quickening. "You're saying I'm trapped here?" His mouth quirked, not a smile. Something sharper. I'm saying we're both trapped here. The staff had disappeared discreetly, leaving only the two of them in the cavernous villa, the marble floors echoing every shift in their weight. Isabel wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly small in her wrinkled sundress, hair still messy from travel. Adrian, by contrast, looked immovable, crisp linen, watch gleaming against his wrist, posture so solid he seemed carved into the glass wall behind him. She hated how easily he unsettled her. "Fine," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "Then I'll stay in a guest room. You won't even notice me." "Oh, I'll notice." His gaze swept over her, clinical, not hungry. "But I don't care what room you stay in. Do what you like. Just understand." His eyes caught hers. "This is my house." Her breath hitched, heat rushing to her cheeks. He wasn't being dramatic. He was laying out the rules. For a long moment, neither moved. The storm outside gathered strength, thunder rumbling faintly over the water. Finally, Adrian pushed off the glass wall and stepped closer. His height forced her to tip her chin back to meet his gaze. He didn't tower, not exactly, but he filled the space in a way Daniel never had. "1 week," he said. His tone carried no room for negotiation. "You stay here, you follow the house's rhythm. No arguments, no drama. After that, when the sky's clear, you can leave. And we will both pretend this never happened." Her lips parted, ready to argue, but the exhaustion of travel, of heartbreak, of the strange unreality of standing in this villa with him, drained her fight. She closed her mouth. "1 week," she echoed softly. Adrian gave a single, decisive nod. Then he stepped past her, his cologne trailing faintly, sandalwood and something sharper, and disappeared toward the master suite. Isabel stood in the center of the marble floor, her pulse still pounding, the echo of his presence clinging to the air. She'd wanted silence. She'd wanted healing. Instead, she'd been given Adrian Rivera. And whether she liked it or not, she would have him for 1 week. Chapter 3: Tension in Paradise. The next morning, Isabel woke to the sound of waves pounding harder against the rocks below the villa, as though the ocean itself was reminding her of her confinement. She stretched in the unfamiliar king-sized bed of the guest suite, the silk sheets cool against her skin, and for one luxurious moment she forgot. She forgot the heartbreak, the storm, and especially who else was in the house. But memory returned quickly. Adrian Rivera. Down the hall. Her ex's older brother, colder than the storm gathering outside, and far too aware of her presence. She slipped into her cream swimsuit, the one piece she'd bought with a fantasy of sipping margaritas by the pool in blissful solitude, and padded barefoot down to the terrace. The villa opened into a sunlit world of marble patios and glass railings. The infinity pool gleamed, perfectly still, the surface reflecting the bruised sky. The staff had set out fresh fruit, carafes of water beaded with condensation, and rolled white towels so soft they looked unreal. For a moment, Isabel let herself exhale. She arranged herself on a lounge chair, stretched long, and tilted her face toward the patch of sunlight breaking through the clouds. The warmth kissed her skin, the salty air lifted strands of her hair. She closed her eyes. And then the water splashed. Her eyes shot open. Adrian was in the pool. Of course he was. He swam clean, steady laps, slicing through the water with mechanical precision. Each stroke was efficient, powerful, unshowy, the kind of discipline that came from years of control, not vanity. His shoulders broke the surface like sculpted stone, water sluicing down his chest, catching on the faint line of dark hair there before trailing lower, disappearing beneath the water again. Isabel forced herself to look away. But she couldn't. Not entirely. The villa was big, yes. Expansive. But in this moment, with him there, it felt suffocatingly small. Every breath of air carried his presence. Every ripple in the pool reminded her they were locked in this cage of marble and glass together. She shifted on her chair, adjusting her sunglasses, and told herself to focus on the horizon. The sea was changing again, waves rising, clouds thickening, that storm threatening to break in full. She tried to relax. But then his voice cut across the water, casual, effortless. "Did you know Daniel has a new girlfriend?" The words landed like a stone in her stomach. She sat up, blinking. "What?" Adrian stopped mid-lap, treading water, his hair slicked back from his face. He regarded her evenly, no cruelty in his tone, but no softness either. He didn't waste time. "They've been photographed in New York already. Restaurants. Hotels." Her chest tightened. She gripped the arms of the lounge chair. "That's not," she cut herself off, shaking her head. "That's not my business anymore." "Maybe not." Adrian swam to the edge, braced his forearms on the stone, and pushed himself up in one smooth motion. Water poured off him, pooling at his feet, his shadow cutting across her as he stood. "But you should know, he lied to you." Her pulse stumbled. "About what?" Adrian reached for the towel a staff member had left folded nearby. He draped it over his shoulders, rubbing the water from his hair, taking his time before answering. "Everything he said finally. Why he left. What he wanted. What he told you about me. About the family." Her mouth went dry. She wanted to snap back, to demand proof, to refuse his intrusion. But the certainty in his voice, calm, unshaken, dug under her skin. She stood abruptly, wrapping her cover-up tighter around her shoulders. "I don't need you to translate my ex's mistakes for me. I lived them." Adrian tilted his head, studying her like he was reading a contract. His lips curved, not a smile, but something more dangerous. "Then you should know I don't lie, Isabel." The sound of her name in his voice made her chest tighten painfully. For a moment, the storm outside seemed to slip into the villa itself. The air was thick. The silence electric. Isabel turned away, forcing herself to stare at the horizon, at the bruised sky pressing low against the restless sea. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the echo of his words. Daniel lied. Adrian doesn't. And somehow, that unsettled her more than anything else. Chapter 4: Flashbacks and Fire. The rain arrived suddenly, without warning. One moment, the sky was heavy and grey, pregnant with threat. The next, it broke open with a crack of thunder, sending a sheet of water tumbling over the villa's terraces and flooding the marble in quick, shimmering streams. Isabel had lingered too long on the patio, trying to lose herself in the storm, trying to silence the echo of Adrian's words about Daniel. He lied about everything. But when the rain came, it came hard. She gasped as the wind whipped her cover-up against her body, plastering the fabric to her skin, strands of damp hair clinging to her cheeks. She turned, ready to run for the sliding glass doors, when she felt it, a presence. Adrian was already there. He stepped forward out of the villa's shadow, an umbrella snapping open in his hand, the movement smooth and precise. In 3 strides he was beside her, lifting the umbrella over her head just as the downpour thickened into a curtain. "You'll get sick standing out here," he said, his voice low, almost scolding. Her breath caught. Water dripped down the curve of his jaw, ran in dark streaks through his linen shirt, clinging to the lines of muscle beneath. He looked utterly unaffected, like the storm had been waiting for him all along. She pulled her cover up tighter, cheeks hot despite the chill. "I'm fine." "You're not." The words were firm, absolute, in that Adrian way. He shifted the umbrella to cover her more fully, angling himself against the wind so she stayed dry, even if it meant his shoulders and back took the worst of the rain. It unsettled her more than the storm. Because Daniel would never have done this. And the thought slipped in uninvited, vivid as the lightning splitting the horizon, a memory of Daniel at a summer party in Malibu, laughing in the spray of a broken champagne fountain while she'd struggled to find a towel, shivering and ignored. He'd always been the charmer, the golden boy, the one who craved attention more than connection. She'd convinced herself for years that his smiles were enough, that his easy affection covered up the hollowness. Adrian was nothing like him. Adrian was silence where Daniel had been noise. Control where Daniel had been chaos. Ice where Daniel had been sunlight. And yet here he was, shielding her, the umbrella tilting just so, his body angled like a barrier between her and the storm. Not because it looked good. Not because anyone was watching. Because he had decided she should be protected. The realization sank into her chest, heavier than the rain. She looked up at him. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, amber lit faintly by the flash of lightning. Stoic. Remote. As if he weren't even aware how his gesture looked, as if it wasn't something remarkable. "Why do you care?" she asked, the words slipping out before she could stop them. His gaze shifted to hers. For a heartbeat, she thought he might actually answer. But instead, he said nothing. He just looked at her, long enough to make her pulse quicken, long enough to make her turn away first. When they finally stepped back inside, dripping and chilled, the storm raging behind the glass, Isabel couldn't shake the feeling. Daniel had left her exposed, always. Adrian shielded her without hesitation. And it terrified her, because for the first time she realized she might not hate being trapped with him. Not entirely. Chapter 5: The First Dinner. By evening, the storm had quieted into a steady tropical drizzle, the kind that turned the air soft and perfumed with wet hibiscus. The villa glowed against the dark, lanterns flickering along the terraces, candles lit in alcoves to chase away the shadows. Isabel wandered out of her room, stomach tight with hunger but loath to face Adrian again. She half expected him to be cloistered in his suite or pacing the length of the living room with his phone pressed to his ear. Instead, she found the dining room glowing like a stage set. The long table, polished dark wood that seemed almost too heavy for the delicate chairs surrounding it, had been dressed for 2. Not 1. Not a crowd. 2. Crystal stemware. A carafe of water beading with condensation. Napkins folded with precise corners. And in the center, a candelabrum of white taper candles, their flames swaying in the faint breeze from the open doors. She stopped in the doorway. Oh no! The chef appeared from the kitchen just then, smiling warmly, carrying a platter fragrant with roasted fish, charred lemon, and herbs. "Dinner is ready, señorita. Señor Rivera will join you shortly." Before she could protest, Adrian entered from the terrace, freshly showered, his dark hair damp and curling slightly at the edges. He wore a crisp white shirt open at the collar, sleeves rolled neatly, revealing the expensive watch hugging his wrist. His gaze landed on the table, then on her. A pause. Then, flatly, "It seems we've been set up." Isabel crossed her arms. "I'll ask them to bring me a tray in my room." "Don't." He stepped further into the light, his expression unreadable. "The food will go cold." "Sit. It's one meal." She hesitated. She should have refused. But the aromas wafting from the platters, fresh bread, sizzling fish, the faint spice of roasted peppers, combined with the gnaw of her empty stomach betrayed her. So she sat. Adrian took the seat across from her, his movements precise, every fold of linen and placement of silverware somehow deliberate. For a while, there was only the sound of serving spoons against porcelain, the clink of glass as the wine was poured. It should have been unbearable. But then, the wine loosened something. The Sauvignon Blanc was crisp, cold, citrusy. Isabel took a sip, then another, and finally dared a glance up at Adrian. He wasn't just eating. He was watching her. Not with hostility, not even curiosity. Just observing. "What?" she asked, bristling under the weight of it. "You look surprised," he said. "By what?" "That the villa is comfortable. That the food is good. That I can share a table without being impossible." She blinked. "You said it, not me." His mouth curved, just barely. The ghost of a smile that vanished almost as soon as it appeared. The conversation found its rhythm, awkward at first, then easing into something resembling civility. She asked about the wine, he told her it was from his family's cellar, imported specially. She commented on the villa's architecture. He explained it had been built by a famous Mexican architect in the 80s, restored under his orders. At one point, she laughed. It startled her, the sound bursting out of her before she could stop it. Adrian looked at her then, really looked, and something softened in his expression. For the briefest flicker, she saw what Daniel had once called the other side of Adrian, the side that almost smiled, that almost allowed warmth. And then his phone buzzed. Sharp. Jarring. Out of place. Adrian's jaw tightened. He checked the screen, and without a word, pushed back his chair. "Excuse me." The absence of his presence was immediate, like the candles had dimmed. Isabel watched him stride toward the terrace, phone pressed to his ear, voice already low and clipped in Spanish. She couldn't catch the words, only the sharpness of them, the way his hand flexed at his side. The meal remained between them, half-eaten, steam curling upward. For a moment, Isabel stared at the candlelight dancing on her glass of wine and wondered why she felt a strange pang of disappointment. It had only been dinner. But for a fleeting second, it had felt like more. Chapter 6 Storm Watch. By nightfall, the storm was no longer just a threat on the horizon. It had arrived. The villa groaned under the force of the wind, palms bent nearly in half as rain lashed sideways across the glass walls. The sea below had lost its turquoise sheen, transformed into a furious black mass, waves colliding with the rocks in thunderous bursts that rattled the windows. Inside, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then steadied again. Isabel curled into the corner of the oversized sectional sofa, wrapped in a light blanket she'd found at the foot of her bed. The air smelled faintly of ozone, sharp and metallic, carried through the gaps in the terrace doors. She clutched a glass of water, staring at the muted television across the room, though she wasn't watching. The news reports were in Spanish, the anchor's voice swallowed by the storm outside. Her nerves prickled. The villa was luxurious, yes, but it wasn't invincible. The marble felt cold, the glass too thin, the wide open spaces suddenly intimidating instead of liberating. And then she noticed it. The faint glow of light on the terrace. She stood, blanket trailing behind her, and moved closer to the sliding doors. Beyond the glass, half shielded from the downpour by the jut of the roof, Adrian sat in a low chair. A bottle of amber scotch rested on the small table beside him, condensation bleeding across the label. His glass glimmered in his hand, catching the occasional flash of lightning. The storm raged around him, but he looked immovable. His shirt clung to his body, damp at the shoulders from the rain, but he didn't shift, didn't shiver. His posture was deliberate, controlled, the way a man might sit if he were holding back everything he refused to say. For a moment, Isabel considered staying inside. Pretending she hadn't seen him. Pretending she could simply ride out the night cocooned in blankets and denial. But something pulled her forward. She slid the door open. The storm's voice grew louder, wind and rain rushing in. Adrian's gaze flicked to her, just once, before returning to the horizon. "You shouldn't be out here," she said, pulling the blanket tighter. "You shouldn't either." His voice was calm, even, as though the chaos around them barely existed. The rain splattered across her arms, cool and sharp. She hesitated, then stepped further onto the terrace, dragging the blanket over her head like a shield. She sank into the chair across from him, the wicker damp and unwelcoming, but it didn't matter. Neither of them spoke. The storm filled the silence, a symphony of crashing waves and growling thunder, the occasional strike of lightning painting the sky in violent flashes of white. Isabel stared at Adrian, at the hard lines of his face softened by the candlelight flickering from inside the villa. He lifted his glass. Took a slow sip. Set it down again. For a moment, she wanted to ask. About Daniel. About why he seemed so endlessly guarded. About why he'd stepped into the rain with scotch instead of retreating to comfort. But the storm demanded quiet. So she stayed silent. And he did too. They sat like that for what felt like hours, the two of them side by side in the wild heart of the storm, neither giving words to the thoughts circling between them. Finally, a particularly vicious gust of wind slammed against the glass doors behind them, shaking the frame. Isabel flinched. Adrian didn't move. His eyes cut to hers, steady, grounding. And for one suspended moment, Isabel felt something strange. Not fear. Not tension. But safety. As though, despite everything, the storm, the lies, the history, she wasn't alone. That's the end of this part, but trust me, the next one is even more thrilling. We drop fresh episodes every day, so don't miss out. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, you won't want to miss what's coming next.
Thanks for listening to Billionaire Romance Stories, where love meets luxury in the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. We love hearing your favorite twists and favorite theories. And don't forget to ring that bell, because in this world of yachts, secrets, and luxurious romance, the next story is always one click away.